If you can't win, then burn it down, I guess. I got this story from Vox. I love how Vox does this. Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation will delegitimize the Supreme Court, and that's good. See, normally what they do is it says, and that's a good thing, but they do it too much. So I think they said, hey, we want to do it, but we don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over again. Like, seriously, Google search quote, and it's a good thing, and you'll probably see like Vox come up like crazy. It says, it's time America woke up to the radical right that's run the court for years. Run the court for years, what Trump just literally got in and put into conservatives, you know? So here's the thing. Before the election, I told a lot of people I know, like some people, it's really weird how people draw these conclusions. I've had people come to me and say, Tim, but weren't you a Trump supporter in 2016? No, I never was. And then they'd be like, but you said to vote for Trump. And I'm like, no, I never did. What I said to people was, if you like America as it is, this American exceptionalism, this, war in Syria, you like the international trade and all of that stuff and free trade agreements, you want America to maintain status quo, you vote for Hillary. But if you want protesters to wake up and disrupt the system, you vote for Trump. I didn't tell anybody directly to or not to. The point I was making is that if Trump gets elected, and he did, you will see massive uprising from the left. And the left usually sits around doing nothing. If Hillary Clinton gets elected, no one will care when she enacts, in screwed up foreign policy. And at the time, the left was really concerned with foreign policy, which they aren't really now because it seems like the left has been split. There are some people who are still diehard foreign policy, activists, and they're like kind of just nowhere now. Like nobody watches their channels. They're not super relevant. The point is, Donald Trump, as of now, has done a bunch of good. The economy is better than ever. He got his people in. So the point I'm making is that there are people who felt like voting for Trump is something they absolutely hated, but they want the system to burn down faster, right? This is kind of what Vox is saying. The idea is that, you know what? It's not bad if the Republicans keep winning because the pendulum is going to swing so hard to the right that it's going to come crashing down in the other direction. Meaning, with more conservatives on the Supreme Court, liberals in this country, I don't even want to say liberals, but yes, some liberals and leftists will panic and then actually rally and start fighting back because they don't unless they're threatened. So this is from Matthew Iglesias. Let's see what he has to say. Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court has prompted not only exuberance and anger, but also a kind of hazy worry in some corners that the circumstances of his ascension will call the court's legitimacy into doubt. I believe Brett Kavanaugh is a good man, says Murkowski. In my view, he's not the right man for the court at the time. Key takeaway is she thinks confirming Kavanaugh would damage the people's trust in the Supreme Court. The truth is, it's about time. The one upside to putting a person on the bench whose dishonesty and literal and metaphorical intemperance has been on such flagrant display is that it could prompt a sorely needed reckoning with the larger issue of the court's mostly pernicious role in American public affairs. What? For the past 25 years, the judiciary has moved increasingly further right, and the Supreme Court has tossed out duly enacted legislation, opened the floodgates to public corruption, and undermined substantive democracy. The public has largely missed this bigger picture because the American progressive movement has focused attention on the role of court in protecting abortion rights. Reasonable people can disagree about the appropriate remedy to this problem, but the first step is to recognize it exists. And there's no better face for an increasingly radical and anti-democratic Supreme Court than the ruddy, yelling visage of Brett Kavanaugh. And here we have the exact point. What he is saying is that because the right has won, the left will now realize just how bad it is. This is not uncommon. Moderate Democrats and liberals don't want the Supreme Court to go to conservatives. They want moderate liberals and, Democrats to win those positions. But people who are on the far left don't believe in voting at all. They probably don't vote, but they do protest. You'll see, the people at J20 who went around smashing windows, those people didn't vote. Maybe some of them did, but most of them didn't. And if they did, seriously, I know some people who are far left who told me they would vote for Trump because they want to watch the world burn. They want to rally people to protest, to riot. They want a revolution. I forgot what it's called, but there's a phrase for it. The idea is that you want to vote in your opposition so that you can use it as a recruiting tool for complete revolution. If the liberals win, if the Democrats win, if the moderate leftists win, now what ends up happening is people say, well, we're not doing too bad. We got our people in office. When the right wins, they panic and they start protesting. That's why these people didn't protest Obama when Obama was doing entirely screwed up things. They didn't know or care, and the media didn't really cover it. The media, how they portray Trump, would never fly with Obama. Probably, there's a couple reasons. For one, Obama was too slick, too clean cut. Trump's off the cuff, and he says things that are easily taken out of context. I mean, Obama has some out of context stuff too, but for the most part, Obama had a very carefully crafted image for the media. Trump doesn't care about the media. He uses the controversy, right? All right, so we'll just keep reading the story. The mysterious case of the Gun-Free School Zones Act. The true turning point for the court came in 1995 case of United States v. Lopez, which featured a defendant challenging the Gun-Free School Zones Act. This was, interestingly, not a Second Amendment case that attempted to argue that prohibiting guns near schools violated an individual's rights to keep and bear arms. Rather, a 5-4 Supreme Court majority invalidated the law on federalism grounds, saying that Congress simply lacked the authority to regulate the matter. That's interesting. This turned out to be a huge deal in practice because Congress was able to come back later and rewrite the law with a specific stipulation that it only related to guns that were shipped across states. It was, however, a shot across the bow. The Supreme Court was no longer going to allow the people's elected representatives to decide for themselves what steps were and were not useful exercises of congressional authority to regulate the national economy. Matthew Iglesias is 100% wrong. The Constitution needs to be interpreted as it was intended. That's true. Claiming that, look, when the court ruled that the Congress didn't have the authority to do so, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. We don't want the government to start overstepping its bounds. He's arguing they should have that authority based on our elected officials' decision. If we elect people who say the First Amendment shouldn't be there, you can't just ignore it, right? And that's why the Constitution is a good thing. My opinion on the Constitution is that it is overwhelmingly a good thing, and there are basic things in it that are really, really great, and some things in it that are wrong. But the Constitution was made with the ability to be amended, in which case, if they would like the Supreme Court to rule in favor of them, regulating gun-free zones, you simply need to add an amendment that states, yes, you can have guns, but Congress shall have the authority to regulate certain rules, whatever. It's called an amendment. That's what we do in this country. You don't just get mad that the Supreme Court is siding with the Constitution. You actually need to advocate for amending the Constitution, it's rather difficult. And that's a good thing. The Constitution is, in my opinion, fantastic. The fact that we have the Bill of Rights and the later amendments that have changed and made things better, it's fantastic. Perhaps there will come a time where it is outdated because they couldn't foresee the technological advances and how that would shape society. But for the time being, I believe that we have survived as long as we have and progressed as far as we have because of how they drafted the Constitution. He says the decision left a serious question as to how far the court planned to take the new doctrine. And as long as Sandra Day O'Connor was around, the answer turned out to be not particularly far. It's funny they called it a new doctrine. That's rather terrifying. I don't want to read through every point he makes because the general idea... Let's look at this one, the Supreme Court versus democracy. Even while upholding portions of the Affordable Care Act, for example, John Roberts' court arbitrarily decided that the incentives the ACA created to expand Medicaid were excessively powerful, and states should be allowed to opt out of the expansion without losing access to existing federal funding streams. There is absolutely no basis for this idea anywhere in the text of the Constitution, though it does follow from some earlier equally ungrounded Rehnquist-era decisions, and millions of Americans have been deprived of their health insurance as a result. You know what? We're often between a rock and a hard place, and it's hard to know what the right choices are. I think that the Supreme Court justices should follow the Constitution, and I think if there's things that need to be changed, they should amend the Constitution. We should vote to amend the Constitution. If what he's arguing is true, that there was no text in the Constitution that justifies that, well, then I would agree with him. Making decisions without following the Constitution based on your personal opinion is something worth challenging. I wouldn't criticize the Supreme Court justice because he said, the Constitution says X, right? These are constitutional scholars. But not surprisingly, a judicial viewpoint that's uninterested in democratic governance is also fundamentally uninterested in the practice of democracy. Okay. The judiciary is not a reflection of democracy. And this is the craziest thing to me because right now everyone's saying, only 140 million people were represented in Judge Kavanaugh's appointment. And that's not how it works. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. And I often look at it this way. The 3 branches of government are kind of 3 different governments. It's rather brilliant. I don't know if this is true, but I imagine that at some point the founding fathers were like, should we have a monarchy? We don't want centralized power. Should we have like a council? Councils can't act quickly enough. All right, well, what if we just had direct democracy with representatives? Yeah, but that'd be too much bickering. What if we had all three and they checked on each other? Then we have an executive, the individual, the president. His power is limited, but there are certain things he can do. He can snap his fingers to defend the country quickly. That's important because democracy is best served through a council, through direct democracy. But the problem is they can't make moves quickly enough to defend themselves from foreign threats. So an executive branch makes sense. Brilliant. Well, then we have all of them keep each other in check. See, passing laws through Congress and the Senate is brilliant, in my opinion. I think the system works really well. The judiciary is not elected by the people through democracy. They're appointed by the executive branch and then approved by the legislative branch. And that's what happened. And God, let me wrap this up so I can rant a little bit more. He says, if that argument begins to gain purchase with them, he said, either way, the political path forward starts with a clear articulation of the dilemma. Starting with a substantive doctrine of Lopez and the procedural weirdness of Bush v. Gore, judicial conservatives have been undermining electoral democracy to entrench their power on the bench and then wielded that power to undermine democratic governance. Yeah. Look, a lot of people don't seem to understand why we have a republic and not a direct democracy. And it's rather terrifying. The system we have now is probably the best. Maybe we can do better. Maybe. But tyranny of the majority is terrifying, and it will lead you to ruin. Right now, most people live in cities. I believe that's the case. The problem with that is the wants and interests of cities are dramatically different than the wants and interests of rural areas. And if we went by the popular vote instead of the Electoral College, then the rural areas would always lose. Always. And no one would want to live there because they will be oppressed by the cities, and you will end up with a Hunger Games scenario where as long as you live in the capital, you will win your rights and strip the rights of those who live in areas like Wyoming and Montana. But no, we need to make sure. So actually, let me go back. There's a great quote. I think it's Ben Franklin. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner. A republic is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. That's the point. Yes, sometimes we go through periods where the minority, though a very large minority, has their way, and that's important. Otherwise, no one would live in our farming areas. No one would live where there's coal mining or where petrol is produced. Petroleum is well, I don't want to say mined or I don't know. What do they call it? Drilled for, whatever. Nobody would want to live in these areas where they're outside of cities because the cities will always win. And this is one of the problems California is facing. I wouldn't cover the drought. In Tulare County, their surface water goes to the cities because the cities outvote them. Millions of people live in LA, a couple 100,000 people live in Tulare County. So when the state votes, guess who loses? And then what are you going to, like the people in the valley, in Tulare, are responsible for like a massive portion of the local economy, of the state economy. Farmers are fuel California. When the cities can say, we should get the water because there's more of us, you actually hurt yourselves. So it's not perfect, but there's a reason why we have an electoral system. There's a reason why we live in a republic, and there's a reason why North Dakota gets 2 senators. There's a reason why we have a Senate and a House, okay? The House of Representatives is based upon population. The Senate is based upon state, and it makes absolute perfect sense. My God. To think that, when forming a government, the founding fathers didn't plan ahead is mind-numbing. To think that celebrities and, people who work at online magazines know better than the founding fathers is mind-blowing. Anyway, stick around. I got another video coming up in just a few minutes.